Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this discussion panel on food security and food safety. And my name is Chenzu Yu. I'm an associate professor at Agriculture and Biosystems Engineering Department at Iowa State University. And Avinti asked me to give a trigger talk to start the panel discussion on food security and safety. So here it goes. As we all know, our planet is facing a lot of challenges. We have a rising population that is projected to reach 9 billion by 2048. We have a changing climate that is putting more and more challenge, extreme weather around the world, and putting more and more challenges to agricultural production to produce enough food to feed this increasing population. At the same time, we have limited resources, limited arable land around the world, which is not even distributed evenly. And in a lot of the countries that are having the most population rise, the arable land is actually quite limited, which making feeding the rising population even more challenging. And also, the last but not the least, the changing economy around the world is also changing people's diet and putting more and more demand on meat and vegetable, and which put additional stress on the agricultural production system that we have. So these emerging challenges all are related to the topic of today, food security and food safety. And if we just look at meat consumption as one example, right? Around the world in developed economies, rich countries, the meat consumption is already at pretty high demand level, and it's going to be pretty stable. It's going to stay there. We don't expect to see in rich countries the demand for meat to decline anytime soon. But at the same time, in developing countries, in emerging markets, as the economy becomes better, people are demanding more and more meat, which all put pretty big pressure on production end. So if we look at a simple projection, by 2050, we expect to see globally the demand for protein food, meat, eggs, and milk are going to be at a much higher level than it is comparing to in 2005. So how we're going to produce enough to feed the increasing population to meet the need of a changing diet globally is going to be a major challenge. So if we look at what we are talking about when it comes to food security, I come up with a few bullet points. Definitely our discussion is not limited to these bullet points that I put up here. It's just serve to start our discussion. So on crops and animal production, we talk about what kind of technology advance that is out there or on the horizon that is going to change the game, right? We talk about another green revolution, like related to, for example, genetic engineering, GMO production that can significantly increase yield of crops. Certainly, I know that this is a controversial topic in some parts of the world, within some portion of our population. When they see the word GMO, well, there is a alarming bell. So what is the alternative? Are there any alternative out there that can uh, eliminate or reduce people's concerns on that particular aspect of the technology advance? And also when it comes to animal production, right, we all know nowadays there's alternative production technology available for animal or meat production for specific, right, like culture-based meat production. Instead of raising animals out there on the land, we can grow meat in a petri dish. And this emerging technology, will that become a game changer in terms of supplying those protein food to meet the growing need of the world? Or what is laying ahead in time for us to generate enough protein food to, meet the need of growing population and changing diet? We also can talk about preservation and waste recycling that related to storage technology. And nowadays, I know that from some of my colleagues working with African colleagues, in Africa, still storage is a main concern for crops, and about 30% of their crops yield actually goes into waste every year to worms and insects, and rats and rats and mouse, because of insufficient storage facilities and technology. Then what kind of new technology that we can develop, which certainly needs to be easily available and cheap, so that developing countries, farmers in developing countries can adopt them. Ecosystem protection, sustainable growth is always of a concern, because as we said, we have limited arable land, limited water resources. All that will restrict how much growth that we can sustain. And if we don't manage our systems well or smartly, then we're gonna cause detrimental effect to the environment, which is, in the long run, and sustainable. Then we can talk about government policies, regulations, and any topics that is related to our general scene of food security and safety that is of interest to our panel. Closely related to food security is food safety. Even if we can produce enough to feed the population, we still need to assure that our food supply is safe, right? So some of the bullet points here: rapid and reliable detection methods. And given what just happened around the world in the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic, we all know that diseases are still right in front of our face. Right? Every day we're facing that challenge. And the foodborne diseases are not exception. We need to deal with them, but the first thing we need to do is to detect what is out there in our food. So that is our gatekeeper. If we don't keep our gate safe, and if we don't know what is coming in, then we can't deal with the problem. So viruses and the pathogenic microbes, toxins and chemical pollutants, these are our traditional targets for detection technology development. And more microplastic and other man-made particles like nanomaterials that get mixed into our food, then we need to detect for them as well, because they may have potentially pretty significant health concerns or health implications as well. Then once we detect these targets, the next step certainly is prevention and the intervention method. Then we need to develop both of these methods at the producer end and the consumer end to assure safety of our food. And also we need to look at or consider medical responses, whether or not we have sufficient medical responses. We have enough medical means at our disposal if a problem arises. Right? So these are all things that we can discuss today in this panel. And this little talk that I'm giving here is just to serve as a trigger point so that we can go into open discussion now. Thank you for your attention.